Hello and welcome to Bits and Atoms, the Grisham Robotics Founder Series. I'm your host, Elias Can, and today I've got David Yacoub, founder and CEO of Omnibio, joining me. To get started, David, would you mind sharing a quick intro about you and Omnibio?
Well, thank you for the introduction, Elias. So at Omnibio, we develop organoid intelligence applications for robotics. So instead of producing traditional world models or foundational models for robotics, we experiment on physical brain culture in order to get a better understanding of how the mind learns and then apply that for more intelligent robots.
Amazing. And I definitely will have some follow-ups on going a bit deeper there, but maybe just to take a step back and look at you personally first. What kind of originally motivated or inspired you to take the leap to become a founder? What's kind of your origin story there?
Yeah, so I've always had an interest in entrepreneurship. I mean, from young, I know it's kind of the cliche answer, but I used to sell sweets at school. I used to sell clothes when I was a teenager. I had vending machines. My first proper business was actually selling cigarette lighters when I was in my undergrad at university. So I've always kind of had that instinct, but Omnibio formed because I took that money from selling cigarette lighters and opened up a genetic engineering lab straight out of university. And that slowly pivoted from what I was originally doing, which was GM crops, into organoid intelligence with the help of my co-founder, Robert, who's also my childhood best friend, as it were. But I think really being a founder for me, I had a very tumultuous time in school. So I think that gave me the ability to thrive in unstructured environments and finding a bit of solace in in those unstructured environments. And I think that that's quite translational to being a founder over working in corporate, where it is a very stable life.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's night and day in terms of the differences there. And yeah, a lot of unstructured thinking and chaos and things that, I think on the founder side that make it very unique and different from a traditional job. Either route can be fine, like no shade to people who go the corporate route. You can have a very nice life there as well. But yeah, the founder route definitely takes a certain kind of mindset and personality. And it sounds like from a young age, it was something that, you're more or less, if I'll use the term, a hustler growing up to sell everything and started to feed that kind of like intrinsic motivation you had.
Yeah.
And now from what you mentioned too, from starting the genetic engineering lab out of school, like maybe I'm starting to get a sense for what the answer might be, but curious as well, for building at the intersection of biology and robotics, I guess maybe how did you stumble or like lead into exactly what you're working on now? Because you mentioned doing genetically modified plants at the beginning, but for what you're working on now at Omnibio, maybe just to give the audience a little bit of an understanding what exactly that is and how you kind of transition from that early genetic engineering into what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I'm of the personal belief that nature has a lot of answers to problems that we have on the technology front. And I've always thought that. And my route in genetically modified crops was actually to genetically modify plants to make them taste better in order to sell it into the restaurant industry. So I think nature as a building block is how we should be looking at technology. And I think time and time again, we create more advanced technologies that seem to resemble nature more and more. But I guess, in effect, when you talk about robotics and intelligence in general and artificial intelligence, people are trying to replicate the brain from first principles. But the real the ideation process of Omnibio was we already know that you can train biological neural culture to perform computational tasks. And we know that it's way more data efficient and way more energy efficient than anything that humanity has produced synthetically. So why would we not start with the brain instead of trying to recreate the brain from first principles?
Absolutely. Yeah. That makes sense. And I guess how does that kind of translate, like that thinking and that kind of initial positioning for how you see neurological processing and how that works? Like, how does that translate into the work that you're doing at Omnibio in terms of maybe to make things a little more simplistic? Like, what might an initial product or early kind of testing look like for you to kind of try and prove out that thesis?
Yeah. So I think in terms of why we want to do this from a consumer facing side is that we don't have nearly as much data to train robotic foundational models as we did for text when we were producing early LLMs. And a lot of the issues that we're seeing in approaches like VLAs is tied to the lack of data. So anything that's more data efficient when you have a finite amount of data should lead to a more intelligent system. And the brain is incredibly generalizable in terms of you learn how to do basic movements, and then based on context clues from your environment, you can take actions that you've never taken before. And that's very important in getting robots to be more useful and more widespread in industry.
Yeah, and that brings up kind of a thread that I've heard from other founders in robotics or around like the robotics space, and curious to get maybe your thoughts here as well, is that I guess maybe one of the bigger challenges, because I think we all think about a future where, you know, we have humanoid robots walking around with us at home, or, you know, a lot more pure play robotic automation in warehouses, or in other like logistics facilities, or large kind of like opportunities like that. But oftentimes the challenge I hear from folks building in robotics and around it is that the data and like real world examples problem of there's just not enough to train a robot to, like you said, like be able to kind of do something new if they haven't seen it before, or have enough similar things that like it can create that new edge case itself. Like, is that something you feel like generally is a challenge in robotics as well?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a challenge in robotics. And I guess that's at the heart of what Omnibio is trying to solve. If you can use much less data to be much more generalizable, we can get to that future way faster than manually collecting the data. And the other part of that is data collection in robotics is very expensive. So even building up that data set costs a fortune. And then that cost is pushed onto your customers at the end of the day. Any data acquisition you've had to do for a company, you have to be able to recover that cost at deployment.
Yeah. Yeah. And what is, since it's so expensive, like what's kind of like the standard or best practices for that data collection piece today? What do folks usually try and do?
I mean, people are very focused on egocentric videos at the moment. There's a bunch of teleoperation data coming through. And under kind of an underrepresented problem in teleoperation is your data set quality is related to the quality of a teleoperator. So that's an issue in the teleoperation side. The egocentric video, again, is an interesting approach, but fundamentally it takes time to get that video.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And circling back to Omnibio more specifically here, I'm curious for you and the team, what's kind of like the next big milestone or place that you want to get to as you're moving along to prove out what you're doing on your side?
It's real life deployments. So we have a couple pilot studies coming up. I won't name with who because I'm not sure if I'm allowed to, but we're entering into the pilot stage. So then it's seeing if the results that we're seeing in simulation are translatable to real life production environments. That's the next step.
Yep. And we won't share anything here in case legal has something to say about it after, so we can keep it high level. But that makes sense. So going from simulation into more of like a real world, still probably to agree, I'd assume, like I don't know if constrained or like very specific is the right term here, but something that is real world, but probably scaled down or like tight to a degree, so you can really like prove out certain aspects as opposed to too broad up front.
Yeah, but because our technology is sold on its generalizability, we've set up the pilot in such a way that we can get those early proof points of generalizability in production environments. Because proving pick and place for us isn't actually the point of the company, I suppose. But in the initial instance, we will have to do that testing, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's true. The generalizable piece, like, it's kind of a balance there of like, you'll have to show some kind of specific tasks, but at the same time, the point is to be able to show like broader, wider capability rather than just like task specific.
And also showing how much data we've trained our models on and how that relates to their behavior in the physical environments. That is another big proof point in these pilots to say, okay, we have trained on X amount of data and look at the accuracy that we're seeing on these tasks in comparison to, well, competing or adjacent technologies in the space.
Yeah. Very interesting. And we've got time here for one more question. I'm gonna kind of switch gears here a little bit because we were discussing this before our chat, and I'm always interested to get thoughts from folks who are either fundraising or have fundraised previously, because it's such an art, kind of not a science. It's hard to have a one size fits all type experience on the fundraising side. And so, I'm curious for you so far, what's kind of been best strategies or tips in terms of what's worked really well, or the opposite side of the spectrum. If you were talking to someone who's going out for a fundraise for the first time, and what would you tell them to totally avoid, or things that you found to be a waste of time and in hindsight would have been best to avoid?
I think that cold outreach is becoming incredibly difficult to pull off because of the advent of agentic AI, because now anyone without any thought at all can send messages to VCs all day. So you can imagine the inbox of an investor on LinkedIn. So if you're doing cold outreach, I think you need to be incredibly thoughtful in the way that you do that. But I think for the founders out there that are going out to fundraise, building your founder network of people in a similar space is actually incredibly helpful. Some of the best conversations that I've had over the past 2 weeks have come through other founders who I'm friends with in our space, introducing me to the partners who led their rounds. That is because for an investor, they have already bet on that person who's making the introduction. So they're very open to portfolio company founder led warm outreach, I suppose is what you'd call it. And even on the flip side, I was talking to one of our investors in Omnibio the other day, and I was mentioning a company in the space that I really liked. And his immediate response to me was, "Oh, should we be talking to them?" So that kind of gives you an insight as to how they think about their portfolio founders and in how much regard they give to their opinions, especially in their space.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's such a good one to mention because, like you said, like number one, the investor will like or at least respect the thought and opinion of the portfolio founder, and if nothing more, to just like have the courtesy of taking the intro or doing something that they believe is passing along someone that they believe is interesting. Like that can be a great way to cut through the noise and chat with a VC or chat with someone that you want to chat with, because it can probably work on the angel side pretty well too. Like, it's somebody who has a respect and appreciation for that person who's making the intro. So there's like multiple kind of, I think, behavioral type aspects that lead into that intro probably working out pretty well.
And I'm sure you've got experience at this at Grishin Robotics. I mean, if one of your portfolio companies came to you and said, "Oh, by the way, you should look into this company," I'm sure you'd at least take the first call. From that point, it's up to yourself and whoever you're speaking to. But I'd find it very unlikely that you wouldn't at least set up that meeting or review the deck maybe in a bit more detail than you would if someone had just sent you the deck on LinkedIn.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's for sure the case that you want to do right by your portfolio founders, and if it's something where like a relationship between them and that other founder can be somewhat like helpful or synergistic, like you don't want to say no to like hurt their chances of like fostering some kind of relationship with that other founder. So yeah, there's like a lot of reasons to kind of move towards a yes as opposed to stonewalling it basically.
Yeah.
And the cold outreach, I think, is a really good point. Like anecdotally for me, my hit rate for cold emails is maybe 1 out of 1,000 that I'll spend time with, versus LinkedIn is much higher probability if they can do at least like a concise, like targeted reason as to why it makes sense to meet.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I found the same thing because I've done cold outreach on LinkedIn. And when I started, I'd send a message that says Omnibio is developing robotic foundation models that require 100 times less data and 50 times less energy. And I thought, well, that's great because I've given them the kind of key information that they need in that message. But actually, what I found is just saying hello and the person's name has a higher hit rate than telling them what you're doing in the first message. So I think being thoughtful or even talking about them as a firm and why you're a fit for their thesis is better than talking about yourself. Although I think you do have to give a nod to what you're building, obviously.
Yeah, at least some kind of like inkling there, and something about who you are, why should they care, and what the ask is. I sometimes get frustrated when people reach out and send me this like long big thing, or this long message, or like a bunch of stuff, and then there's no ask at the end of it. It's just like, here's this information. I'm like, okay, well, are you trying to meet with me? You want me to like look at this and give some kind of like thought, or like there's like no ask at the end, and I'm like, well, there's no call to action. I don't know what I'm doing with this. Like I'm not going to spend the time to like investigate as much. Like, yeah, there usually should be some kind of call to action, or make the ask apparent when you're reaching out to people.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah. And it's funny, like with the AI outreach, I think the most personally, the one that I've found the funniest so far, that was so obviously AI generated, was a picture of me in a coffee shop with that person who had reached out, like cheersing a coffee. And I was like, man, kudos for the effort. Like, it wasn't something that was relevant for me to meet with in terms of what we look at, but I was like, all right, well, there's at least a creative try to like make me
Yeah.
laugh or like
Yeah,
make me
but at least
interested.
they're experimenting, and I think that's
Yeah.
good because it gives you that data-driven insight too. You should be tracking these kinds of metrics during a fundraise. You should be tracking what is your hit rate with certain messages and A/B testing all the way along. Because at the end of the day, it's a sales process. You're selling equity in your company. That is the goal. So
Yeah.
you should treat it as such.
Yeah. Yeah. And likewise on the flip side, on our side too, I do feel a lot of the time in the investor seat, it is very like sales or BD oriented as well. Because if you were to flip the table and say, you know, maybe there's a competitive round happening or a founder who's in high demand, like the stakes are reversed, where it's more of like, I need to be able to sell and position us to the founder to say like, why do you want our money versus 20 other people who can write the same check? Or, you know, it works both ways. It is like this interesting kind of sales and BD type dance that we do on each side.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, David, I want to thank you for spending time with me on Bits and Atoms today. It was great to have you on. I'll let you get back to it. And thank you again for joining me.
No, thank you for having me. Okay.